Hi, this is Dr. Eric Fields. I'm a specialist in compulsive gambling, and today's video is a sort of PSA, public service announcement, that's really primarily geared towards loved ones of compulsive gamblers. Now, if you are someone who's actually struggling with a gambling addiction, you'll also want to pay attention to this because I think it can be very helpful for you as well. A lot of times loved ones feel lost in terms of how to best support their person who's struggling with this gambling addiction. A lot of you who are watching this right now have probably done your own research and your own homework, and you've already discovered that it is not a good idea to bail out your loved one who's struggling with compulsive gambling. A bailout is when your loved one is kind of like in this immediate financial crisis. They owe someone money, or they owe a creditor or a bank, um, or they owe money for rent or their mortgage because they gambled it away. And there's like this immediacy to the situation. And so a lot of times people, out of the goodness of their heart and feeling very bad for the compulsive gambler, will bail them out. They'll give them money. Uh, and the rationale for this is, maybe they'll feel very grateful and they'll say, phew, that was a close one. I'm never doing this again. And so that they don't actually have to experience the totality of this, problematic behavior. Okay. And this backfires all the time because what actually happens is you reinforce this idea that they're able to somehow win and get away with something, even though they've lost, right? Because that's how they accrued this debt. They still could look at it as a win because they have averted the consequences. And gamblers are always trying to win. They're always trying to get away with something. So, first and foremost, you have to know that bailing out somebody, a gambler, is not good. Now, of course, there's a caveat to this. In certain situations, very serious, dire situations, it might be okay to do that, right? Because the consequences will be so much worse. But the large majority of cases, you do not want to bail them out. And so a real serious, dire case that I'm kind of alluding to would not be they owe someone money, or they owe the bank, or they might, be in danger of some kind of negative financial consequences because they can't pay for the rent or something else of that nature. That's not the kind of dire, serious consequences. You can use your imagination, but there obviously are some situations, some exceptions where you'd say, okay, I have to do it. So the takeaway is, try your best to not ever bail them out. They have to learn from this. What is also not a great idea, but better than a bailout, is a loan where you say, okay, I'm going to take care of these expenses, but you're going to be on a strict repayment plan. I'm going to have oversight of your finances. And, basically, we're going to set up a system whereby you're giving me money each week to start to pay off that loan. Much better than a bailout, right? But not great. And just going back to this whole idea of bailout, if you still need convincing of why it's such a bad idea, you remember in 2008 when we had this whole housing crisis or financial crisis and what have you, and then like some of the bigwigs got bailed out by the government. Did they act in a responsible, positive fashion afterwards, or did they act recklessly again? So, just in case you needed some more convincing on that. All right. So any of what I just said could be found on the internet by doing research and what have you. The next thing that I'm going to say is something that is probably going to be new for you and maybe even new for a lot of therapists. And I'm not getting this from any research. I am basing this contention simply off of my own experience. So not only is it not good to fund the problem, right? It's also not great to fund the solution. And I know a lot of you might be like, huh? That sounds odd. The solution to gambling addiction, what is it? It's recovery, right? And how do people recover from gambling addiction? From therapy, a rehab, a recovery program, right? And these all cost money. Now, this is much better than funding the problem, right? The bailouts, the debt, that kind of thing. But it's still not great. It's better, but still not great. And the reason why it's not great to be paying for someone's therapy or rehab is because if they're not paying for it themselves, they're never going to be as committed. And if they're not as committed, then the chances of them being successful and resolving this issue will be reduced. And the impact of the therapy that they receive or the recovery program that they're in will be reduced or tends to be reduced, right? So we're really talking about like the probability or likelihood. The likelihood and probability of them successfully resolving this issue in the best way possible will be reduced. So that, of course, still leaves the door open for possibility that if you do pay for their therapy and treatment, people can still resolve this issue. They can become abstinent or whatever their goal is. They can recover, but the chances are less, right? So if it's at all possible for your loved one to pay for their own therapy, that's what you're going to want to have them do. And again, this is based on my experience. You know, I've worked with so many people who have struggled with compulsive gambling. And I can tell you that the ones that have paid for therapy themselves tend to have the best, most successful outcomes. They tend to have a higher success rate when it comes to overcoming gambling addiction. So this is not possible. I don't want you to feel like, oh, so then I shouldn't do it. No, it's better that they have the help than them not having the help. But if there's any chance that they can fund this, right? So going back to like how a lot of parents and loved ones will, or friends will set up like some kind of repayment plan for a loan that they'll give them to get them out of this hole or debt, right? You can use that idea for their help and treatment. That, you know, this is going to be a loan, and maybe you're not able to pay for the full cost of therapy every week or the program every week, but I want you to be at least giving me some money towards it each week. And then maybe even making them accountable for the full cost of it at some point. Now, I know I'm going to get some pushback on this, especially from parents who are thinking to themselves, like, I don't want my son or daughter to have to worry about another debt, right? Another loan that they're going to have. But you have to understand it's these consequences, and this one being a very natural consequence, not a negative, punitive one. It's you have an issue, and now you need to resolve it, right? And so that takes a level of commitment, a commitment in terms of showing up for each and every therapy appointment, right? And it also involves a financial commitment in terms of paying for it. And when people pay for it, they make better progress. And let me tell you, this isn't just for gambling issues. I have noticed this with many patients of mine before I even became a specialist in gambling addiction, regardless of what they were struggling with. And a lot of you therapists out there will agree with me on this one, right? There is definitely a difference when a patient is paying for their own therapy in terms of their level of commitment and motivation, right? It's also why people seem to make greater gains in therapy when they're paying for it out of pocket versus having an insurance company pay for it. And they only have to pay a $20 to $25 copay. Many of us therapists that used to be on insurance panels and now have been off of them for many years have noticed that our patients now make a lot more meaningful progress, don't they? Why? Because they're more committed, right? If they're paying us a couple $100 a session versus $20 a session for their copay, it increases their level of commitment. And it's no different with gamblers. The only reason why people don't seem to be suggesting this is because of that fear that they're already in debt and this is going to just stress them out more if they have to pay for therapy. But I'm telling you, the positives outweigh the negatives. Unless, of course, they're in a very dire, serious situation that, you wouldn't want them to avoid whatever it is such an imminent kind of situation that they have to address, or there's going to be some serious legal consequences or other kind of really dire, consequences that I'm sure you can imagine or think of, right? I can tell you that those situations are extremely rare, right? So when I'm talking about the exceptions, just understand those exceptions are extremely rare. Even if somebody seems to be in such a, serious financial situation, a lot of times that isn't enough for them to have the exception, right? The exception clause doesn't apply to over 95% of the cases. So chances are, if you're watching this, right, your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife is not in that situation. And so that everything that I'm telling you right now is what you should be following. Do not bail them out. Try your best to not give them any kind of loan. If you want to support them, absolutely help them develop a financial plan to get out of debt. When we say don't bail them out, we're not saying don't support or help them. When I'm saying try not to pay for their therapy, I'm not saying don't help or support them. What I'm saying is try not to help or support them financially, right? If they're in a financial bind, work with them on a financial plan. Try to help them find a financial advisor that can help them, with some kind of repayment plan to get out of debt, or some kind of, financial strategy, right? Help them find a therapist. When they're in therapy, help support them emotionally any way you can, right? Um, you know, these are ways that you can help them. And certainly having oversight of their finances is definitely a great way of helping them as well. So you can be involved with the financial solution or plan. You can be involved with the therapy. Be involved with all that. But don't be involved in terms of forking over money. Try your absolute best to not fork over money. For those of you who have forked over money for the therapy, like I said, it's not a bad thing. It's just not the ideal, right? And certainly, having watched this video, nothing's to preclude you from changing course and saying, hey, son, I know I said I was going to pay for therapy, but what I found out is this may not be the best way to help you. And now I've noticed that, you're just about out of debt, or you got a promotion at work, you're doing pretty well or a lot better financially. It's time for you to start taking over the therapy payments. When people are invested, I don't care what it is, emotionally, mentally, financially, they tend to do better and have better outcomes. So, with something to think about in terms of supporting your loved one with this addiction, I hope you found this video helpful. Take care.